Hour. I'm Blake Prendergast. Secret audio recordings obtained by CBC News are offering a glimpse of how Alberta's government is handling the pandemic. They reveal the Premier and his ministers micromanaging civil servants, overruling expert advice, and focusing on economic recovery and individual freedoms. Alberta now has the highest number of active cases in the country. Jenny Russell reports.
20 recordings of pandemic response meetings obtained by CBC News reveal how Premier Jason Kenney and his cabinet often micromanaged the actions of civil servants, including the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Deena Hinshaw, and sometimes overruled their expert advice. Confidential sources say Kenney is more focused on the economy than public health measures. On June 9th, the day the Premier announced the province's Stage 2 economic relaunch, Hinshaw relayed the political direction she was receiving.
Essentially, I think what we're hearing, and we just want to test this with Minister's office, is they don't want us to enforce anything.
Hinshaw did not respond to an interview request. At a news conference yesterday, she said her job is to provide a range of policy options to Cabinet, who make the final call.
I am grateful that my recommendations have always been respectfully considered in the final decisions.
A spokesperson for Kenney said it is the job of elected officials to make these decisions, and he said there was no political interference. Jenny Russell, CBC News, Edmonton.
Ontario, too, is facing scrutiny this morning over whether politics is trumping science in its pandemic response. Premier Doug Ford says medical experts are calling the shots in his province, but that's not what a report from his own Auditor General says. Trevor Dunn has that story.
Folks. Premier Doug Ford makes the announcements about closing businesses or reopening schools, but who's advising him? Ontario's Auditor General Bonnie Lysyk has found those decisions are being driven more by political staff rather than medical experts.
So the report is factual.
She says Ontario's Chief Medical Officer of Health is not leading the government's response to the pandemic. Instead, the report found Dr. David Williams sits on a health table, which in the chain of command is below another table led by the government's cabinet secretary and the Premier's chief of staff.
And then that group made recommendations to the Premier and the Cabinet, who made the ultimate decisions.
Premier Ford says he has serious problems with the report.
To say that Dr. Williams wasn't leading this response, it just isn't right.
Trevor Dunn, CBC News, Toronto.
Vancouver City Council wants to decriminalize illicit drugs, and last night it voted unanimously to ask the federal government for the power to decriminalize simple possession of illegal drugs.
I really think that by all sticking together, we can do this and we can save lives.
That's Mayor Kennedy Stewart speaking just seconds before the vote. The goal is to try to stem the tide of overdose deaths. Mayor Stewart says Federal Health Minister Patty Hajdu is a champion of decriminalization and can quickly approve the plan, but a decision may not come until spring. Well, glaciers are moving and shifting in British Columbia, and researchers at the University of British Columbia are finding some of the province's freshwater glaciers are much larger than previously thought. Bob Keating has the details.
Maps can accurately show the size of a glacier's surface, but reveal little about depth. And with glaciers, like icebergs, it's all about depth.
You wouldn't expect a model like that to be able to reproduce individual glaciers particularly well.
And so, PhD student Ben Palto and a team of researchers strapped on skis and dragged a sled with ice-penetrating radar across some of the largest glaciers in southern British Columbia. It took them 3 years to accurately map 5 glaciers. And what they discovered is those glaciers are bigger than current modeling. This is good news to Western Canadians in particular, where entire towns and cities rely on glaciers as a source of fresh water, particularly in the summer when they begin to unlock.
This extra thickness, I think, does imply that the glaciers have a little more juice left in them than we previously thought. It might buy us an extra matter of years or extra decades.
Bob Keating, CBC News, Nelson.
And that is the world this hour. From CBC News, I'm Blake Prendergast.
From CTV News at 7:12 a.m. today.
Hello, I'm Catherine Dow from the CTV Newsroom in Winnipeg. Here are the top stories. The federal government is now trying to explain why Canadians will be waiting until January for a COVID-19 vaccine. The Prime Minister is blaming the Harper government for Canada's loss of drug manufacturing abilities. The Liberals say Canada will begin receiving vaccines in January, pending approval by Health Canada. 500 people have now died of COVID-19 in Alberta. The province also reported another 1,200 new cases. Earlier this week, Premier Jason Kenney declared a state of emergency in Alberta and imposed new restrictions. The first of 3 days of mourning is underway in Argentina as the soccer world pays tribute to Diego Maradona. Maradona is being remembered as one of the greatest to ever play soccer and for his heroics as Argentina won the 1986 World Cup. His body will now lie in state at the presidential palace in Buenos Aires for 3 days. And Ontario has now passed legislation to make daylight saving time permanent, but it will only happen if it's done in coordination with Quebec and New York State. The MPP who brought this motion forward says changing times twice a year is an outdated practice that can cause serious negative effects, including increased depression rates. For all the day's top stories and breaking news as it happens, tune to CTV News Channel or go online to ctvnews.ca. I'm Catherine Dow.
From CNBC Tech Check at 4:55 p.m. yesterday.
I'm Kate Rooney, and here's your CNBC Tech Check. Shares of Slack jumped more than 24% following a Wall Street Journal report that Salesforce held talks to buy the company. The deal would likely value Slack at more than its market cap prior to the report of $17 billion. Salesforce stock dropped around 4% on the news. The deal is not guaranteed, and talks could fall through, the Journal reported. Salesforce and Slack were not immediately available for comment. Tesla is recalling more than 9,500 of its Model X and Model Y electric vehicles over potentially faulty roof trim and bolts that could be inadequately tightened. Tesla said it's not aware of accidents or injuries associated with either recall and will inspect affected vehicles and adjust as needed. In October, Tesla recalled nearly 50,000 Model S and Model X cars in China over faulty suspension. YouTube suspended One American News Network from posting new videos and live streaming for 1 week after the right-leaning media organization posted a fake cure for the coronavirus. The move marks YouTube's largest crackdown against OANN. The social media giant has been criticized for allowing the network to spread misinformation. And that's it from the West Coast. Happy Thanksgiving. We will see you back here on Friday.
From DW News Brief at 6 a.m. today.
This is DW News, and these are our top stories. German Chancellor Angela Merkel has told Parliament that measures to curb the coronavirus may well be extended into next year. She said more restrictions were necessary as of next month because although the infection rate has stabilised, it remains at a high level. The number of deaths has also reached a record high. Argentina has declared 3 days of mourning for superstar footballer Diego Maradona. He died of a heart attack on Wednesday at the age of 60. Fans are paying their respects at the presidential palace in Buenos Aires, where Maradona's body is lying in state. A Turkish court has handed down life sentences for 337 people accused of an attempted coup in 2016. Many of the defendants are former army commanders and pilots. They were convicted of crimes including murder and attempting to overthrow the constitution. This is DW News from Berlin. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at DW News or visit our website, dw.com.
From Bloomberg First Word at 1:41 a.m. today.
The President of the United States, Mr. Trump, has pardoned his first national security advisor, Michael Flynn. Now, Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI about conversations he had with Russian ambassador. Before trying to switch his plea, the President portrayed the prosecution as evidence of a broader conspiracy against the White House. Democrats have hit out at the move. France is accusing the UK of dragging its feet over Brexit. The nation's foreign minister says the outcome of talks remains highly uncertain and the two sides are still extremely far apart. On some of the key issues, the EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says the coming days will be decisive. UK Chancellor Rishi Sunak is facing a backlash for his decision to cut the UK's foreign aid budget. It's a signal that the government plans to prioritise the domestic economy. But many are criticising the decision, including the former Prime Minister David Cameron, who says the money is about who we are as a country. Italy is calling on the ECB to cancel government debt incurred during the pandemic. A top aide to the Prime Minister, Giuseppe Conte, wants to wipe out the bonds or hold on to them forever. The demand reflects the deep fiscal hole Italy finds itself in. It's already suffering from high levels of debt before the pandemic. Global News, 24 hours a day, on air at Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries around the world.
Why does she always stop in the middle of the road?
Yo, man, why are you judging my cat, dog?
Dude, what is wrong with you?
Why are you judging my cat, dog?
Like, what?
No, I know what she's doing. I'm more than aware.
Does she have
what
a
car?
death wish?
What car? What car? What car? What car? What car? What car?
What are you doing, Jinx? Get off the middle of the road.
Show me. What car? What car?
She's like, huh?
What car?
Huh?
What car?
It's like she's like, I just want to run the point. Then I run the street.
I run the street, man. I run the street, man.
Like, and it's always like right there. She's like, this is the line between us and them. And I cross that line every day.
They don't know about Biggie or Pac. They don't even know. They don't even know.
She's like, what's beef?
Let's stop.
Oh my god, that's like her thing in the morning to go over there, get the dogs round up, and then just stand there, middle of the road, and act
Oh
like.
my fucking god. The neighbor's just like, that goddamn cat in the middle of the road again.
He wants to be like, what's up with that cat?
The dog doesn't even need to use the bathroom, just fucking... Oh my gosh, you know that dog wakes up every morning, it's just like, I know you ain't there. I know you're not in the middle. Oh my god. Yo, if they would just let me out, I would show you who owns this road.
Oh man.
You know why they call it animal control? They missed you. Alright guys, podcast. I'll do this properly, I swear.
And it's our last before we take a little break for American Thanksgiving. We'll be back on Monday, so we wanted to go out on a high note. Today, Explain producer, reporter, sports correspondent, musical director Noam Hasselfeld has been hard at work on a new show with Vox's science team, so we thought we'd bring it to you today. It's called Unexplainable. It's a show about the biggest, strangest questions in science that still haven't been answered. And we want to hear what you think of it, so tweet at me or at the show. I'm at Ramaspuram. The show is at today_explained, or you can send us an email. We're todayexplained@vox.com. Here is Noam.
I remember the first time I saw the movie Men in Black. I must have been in like 3rd or 4th grade, and the whole thing was pretty fun. It was breezy, action-packed. And then I got to the final scene. The camera zooms out. You see trees all in New York City, the Earth, the moon, Saturn, entire galaxies, until it zooms out so far that you can see that everything is just inside a tiny marble. And there's a whole bunch of other marbles in a bag. And these aliens are just tossing them around. It kind of terrified me. I had these nightmares about being stuck in that bag of marbles, just thinking that everything I knew and everyone I loved was so small. Even our universe was insignificant. But that was just a movie. This is a story about the scientist who discovered it was real. Not the aliens part, to be clear, but she discovered that everything we can see, everything we can touch, everything we know is just a tiny sliver of what the universe really is.
So it's the late 1960s. It's evening time. The stars are coming out. Just outside of Tucson, Arizona, out in the desert at what's called Kitt Peak National Observatory.
Science writer Ashley Yeager.
Vera Rubin, an astronomer who's very interested in how galaxies work, and Kent Ford, her collaborator, are getting ready to point one of the telescopes at Kitt Peak to the night sky.
They've got this new cutting-edge telescope, and they're pointing it towards stars at the edge of a spiral galaxy called Andromeda.
And they're trying to get the speeds of these stars. How fast are these stars going around Andromeda?
Up until that point, there was an assumption about how stars in other galaxies would move.
That the stars closer in would fly around the center of the galaxy, and the stars farther out would go slower than the stars closer in.
The idea was that they would basically work like planets in our solar system.
So Mercury is flying around the sun because it's so close in.
It's going super fast, more than 100,000 miles per hour.
You know, it's getting all of that gravity from the sun. Pluto's super far out.
Getting less gravity from the sun, going like 10 times slower.
So it's kind of just like, I'll get there someday.
But this idea that stars further out would go slower like Pluto, it was just an assumption.
Almost no one had attempted to do things far out in a galaxy.
Vera passed away in 2016, but we've got recordings of her old interviews.
And I was always skeptical in the sense that I thought if you hadn't learned something, you just didn't know it. You couldn't just infer it.
And Vera was after something big.
I guess I wanted to confirm Newton's laws.
So they're out there at the telescope, slowly gathering data, and as they do, Vera notices something unexpected.
We found that the stars very far out were going almost exactly as fast as the stars in the interior.
These stars, these hot young stars in Andromeda, are moving way too fast than what Newton's gravity would allow for.
They're going so fast that you'd expect them to just fly off, slingshotting into space.
I mean, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I think it was kind of like a what the fuck moment. It was just so different than what everyone had expected.
There were two equally unsettling explanations.
Either Newton's law of gravity is wrong, or we have no clue what's going on at the outer edges of the galaxy. There's got to be something happening out there that we don't understand.
Unexplainable.
This is Unexplainable, a show about all the things we don't know. I'm Noam Hassenfeld. This isn't a show about answers. It's about the questions, why they matter, what's standing in the way of a solution, and how to grapple with the unknown. We're starting with one of the biggest scientific unknowns. What is the universe made of? That observation Vera had out there in the Arizona desert, it set her on a path to confronting this massive scientific question. And it would ultimately upend what physicists thought they knew about the universe. But it's not like Vera had a eureka moment on the spot.
I mean, in retrospect, I was terribly stupid because I didn't get excited about it.
When she made her observation, Vera had a few options. Option one, she could dismiss it, just like say it's not a big deal.
I mean, when you first see it, I think you're afraid of making a dumb mistake. You know, that there's just some simple explanation.
Option two, she could do something that happens often in science. Come out with a grand, sweeping conclusion based on limited data.
And of course, in science, it can be a bit of a race.
But Ashley Yeager, the science writer, says Vera went for option three.
She wanted to collect more data. She never assumed anything. She was always like, okay, well, I don't want to just believe that. What's the data to support that evidence?
Honestly, this is one of the things that makes me admire Vera so much. She had this chance to wow the scientific world with some bonkers conclusions, and she waited. She was careful.
And so Vera and a couple other people, they really start to do a systematic study of galaxies.
And it wasn't just a one-off in Andromeda.
They all show this bizarre behavior of stars, these stars out far in the galaxy moving way, way too fast.
The data pointed towards an enormous problem. The stars couldn't just be moving that fast on their own. They needed some kind of extra gravity out there acting like an engine. And there had to be a source for all that extra gravity, which might mean
there's a shit ton of matter out at the edge of the galaxies that is tugging those stars along.
Except even when scientists looked through the most advanced telescopes, no one could see any of it.
That raises the next question of, like, what is it?
Vera and other astronomers could only guess.
Maybe it's black holes and, really faint stars and planets that we can't see. They would say that it was baseballs. They were teasing, obviously. But as they're looking out there, they just can't seem to find any kind of evidence that it's some normal type of matter.
At a certain point, they basically have to say,
we really have no clue what it is.
And this is where it all gets way weirder.
There's this invisible mass, what astronomers call dark matter.
Dark matter.
Hanging out at the edge of these galaxies, tugging those stars along, making them move super, super fast. Way faster than we would ever have assumed.
To move this many stars, there would need to be a staggering amount of dark matter. More than all the rest of the normal matter in the universe combined. But it was completely invisible, which naturally raised a lot of questions.
What is this stuff?
No idea.
Is it the stuff that makes up you and me? Is it normal matter?
What does that even mean?
Or is it something completely different that we have to kind of rethink our entire structure of the universe?
That's what it was starting to look like, which is probably why in the 60s, the idea wasn't exactly catching on. Decades before Vera, other scientists had seen stars and galaxies moving too fast, and they'd had the same three options Vera had out there in the desert. Some chose option 1. They dismissed it. Some went for option 2. They made sweeping conclusions about dark matter, but they didn't have all the data that Vera had, so the idea of dark matter just kind of floated at the fringes of science for decades. I mean, it takes a lot to make scientists rethink the entire structure of the universe, especially when it involves
a shit ton of matter
that we don't understand.
I think many people initially wished that you didn't need dark matter. It was not a concept that people embraced enthusiastically.
And then came Vera, and all of Vera's data to really turn things around for dark matter.
She does 20 galaxies, and then 40, and then 60, and they all show this bizarre behavior of stars out far in the galaxy moving way, way too fast.
I mean, it just piled up too fast. Observations were undeniable enough so that most people just unenthusiastically adopted.
So at that point, the astronomy community is like, okay, we have to deal with this.
Vera convinced the world where previous scientists couldn't.
And I think it's because she did this in so many galaxies. We're talking 60 galaxies. There was really no denying it.
Ultimately, in a 1985 talk to the largest body of astronomers in the world, almost 2 decades after that moment in the Arizona desert, Vera had enough data to declare her grand, sweeping conclusion. Nature has played a trick on astronomers who thought they were studying the universe.
And she says that we have been studying matter that makes up only a small fraction of the universe. The rest of the universe is stuff that we don't understand and we can't see yet. What makes up you and me and the planets and the center of the galaxy, that's normal matter, that's everyday matter, but that is not the bulk of the matter in the universe. I mean, you're totally flipping the script of what we understand.
It's kind of the equivalent of the realization that the Earth isn't at the center of the universe.
Now, not only is Earth not the center of the universe, now the matter that we knew is not the center of the universe. That most of the matter in the universe is some crazy thing that we can't even describe. We have no idea what it is. It's mind-blowing. It kind of hurts your brain to think about it.
It's almost an anti-Eureka. Vera Rubin didn't discover something. She discovered how much we don't know. A blank in our knowledge. Today, that blank is still there. And as they try to fill it, scientists are gazing off into deep space, gathering clues at the bottom of old mines, and wondering, what if none of this is real? That's after the blank.
Support for the show today comes from you because Vox just launched a new online store, so you can finally
more than all the other matter in the universe combined. But, aside from what it does, like, speeding up stars and galaxies, what is the actual stuff of it? Like, what is dark matter made of?
Yeah, so no one knows. So if you don't know, if you've been confused, you're where science is at. We don't know what dark matter is.
Do we have any kind of guesses about what kind of thing it is?
Well, scientists think it's a particle.
What's that? Is that like an atom? Smaller than an atom?
Smaller than an atom. So particles are the basic building blocks of nature. They're like the smallest Lego brick that makes up reality. And so we think that dark matter just might be another one of these little Lego bricks.
Okay.
But it's like, as a building block of nature, it's really, really weird. You couldn't touch dark matter if you tried. Like, it would just go right through your body. It's kind of like a ghost.
Okay, so it's invisible, you can't touch it. It kind of sounds made up.
It's not made up. This is what our observations lead us to think. Astronomers have even seen these galaxy clusters smashed together. And when this happened, the dark matter just went straight through.
And that's why we'll
And that's what makes dark matter really hard to find.
How do you find something that is invisible and untouchable? It kind of sounds like an impossible problem.
It's just shy of impossible, which is really cool. And, to solve it, we actually have to go to, some of the deepest places of the Earth.
My name is Priska Cushman, and I'm a professor of physics at the University of Minnesota.
So I talked to this physicist, Priska, who I have to say, in one of our conversations on video chat, two of her pet birds just flew into the shot, and one landed on each of her shoulders, and she just continued the interview. And
really?
Yeah. I won't call her a pirate, but she's at least this really cool explorer. She's working on this experiment at the bottom of a mine.
You get togged up in a suit with a hard hat and a utility belt, and you get into a large, enormous elevator that takes you down with, of course, all the rest of the miners.
The miners get off before the scientists, and actually, because the mine is so deep below ground, it's actually warm down there because, it's closer to the center of the Earth.
And then you exit into a dusty and hot environment. You're there in a regular mine drift, so you have to walk about 1 kilometer to get to the laboratory itself.
The really hard thing about finding dark matter is that, it just passes right through normal matter, and the thing is, most of our all of our scientific equipment is made out of normal matter. So it's like trying to catch a ghost baseball with a normal mitt.
There are billions and trillions of these dark matter particles coming through the Earth, coming through you and me, coming through our detector all the time. But mostly they don't interact with the detector. Mostly they just go right through it because they're so weakly interacting.
But, and this is the hope, every once in a while, a dark matter particle might just nudge a little bit of a nucleus of some atom of normal matter.
So that the crystal within which that nucleus is gives a tiny little shiver that we can actually detect.
So the metaphor here, and this is really simplified, is they've created this extremely subtle bell.
If you push one of the nuclei out of place, it's like giving a little tap on the bell. And that tap is so faint that it is almost impossible to hear when you're listening to all the other taps of all the other particles hitting it.
So that's why they've gone deep underground. Like, this thing is shielded from the cosmic radiation that comes from space, that comes from our sun. And there's just like this beautiful patience to it of just kind of waiting and listening and hoping that, you know, the most common source of matter in the universe will make itself apparent to us one day.
And have they found the particle yet?
No.
I really did get into this business because I thought I would be detecting this within 5 years.
And it's been almost 20 years for her, and still nothing.
I guess I'm less sanguine about the possibility that I'll discover it in 5 years.
You know, there are experiments all over the world trying to detect dark matter, and like they're even trying to create it at the Large Hadron Collider, the big particle collider in Europe. And no one has found anything.
I gotta say, I mean, I get that all these scientists are looking for this all over the world, but what if it's just not out there? I mean, it's invisible, it's untouchable, we've been looking for it for decades. What if there's just another way to go here? Like, when I was talking to Ashley, the science writer, for the first half of this episode, I kept thinking about the choice Vera Rubin had out there in the desert, that there were these two possible explanations for what she saw.
Either Newton's law of gravity is wrong, or we have no clue what's going on at the outer edges of the galaxy.
Astronomers basically chose the second option, right? That there's tons of dark matter out there. It explains why these stars are moving too fast. But we never really tackled that first option, like reworking gravity. So, I mean, like, instead of looking for this invisible particle that sounds kind of like a fantasy, what if we just kind of tweaked the laws of gravity?
This is possible.
Really?
It makes a lot of the physicists, particularly the ones I spoke to in learning about this, kind of uncomfortable. They don't want to just like throw out all these great observations that they've been making. But at the same time, they know this other door, this idea that, you know, maybe dark matter is something of a mirage created by gravity, something we don't understand about gravity. Like, they know that door isn't closed. And I spoke to this other physicist, Priya Natarajan, who, like, just loves thinking about, like, these big picture problems in science. And she told me that the split to either find a physical thing or to, like, rethink our basic assumptions, it's happened before.
In the mid-1800s, we were mapping the orbit of Uranus, which takes a long time to go around the sun, right? And what was found was that the actual shape of the orbit was slightly different from Newton's laws predictions.
It was a huge problem. Like, Newton's laws, not supposed to be broken.
But Urbain Le Verrier, an applied mathematician from France, realized, there's an interesting possibility, which is that maybe we are missing an observational fact. There is another planet beyond Uranus.
Some source of gravity pulling on it, making this wobble.
And given the wobble, given the departure of Uranus from Newton's laws, he was able to predict exactly where this planet ought to be.
And, you know, lo and behold, scientists found this planet, and they called it Neptune. The funny thing is, not too long after that, a similar thing happened.
There was an anomaly in the orbit of Mercury. And Urbain Le Verrier said it's the same explanation. You are missing, perhaps, a planet that lies between the Sun and Mercury. And he called it Vulcan.
They searched for Vulcan. I saw this little story in the New York Times from 1876. Like, please, if you can, look for Vulcan. Look for this planet crossing the Sun.
But they never found Vulcan. And that anomaly remained.
It actually turned out like our theory of gravity needed to be updated. Einstein needed to come along. He told us that massive objects like the sun actually bend space around it. And his explanation solved the problem. It explained why Mercury's orbit was where it was.
So we really needed a reconceptualization of gravity.
Huh. So on the one hand, we could just find dark matter like we found Neptune.
Yep.
But it's possible that we just need to update our theory of gravity again, which would mean there's no dark matter, just like there's no Vulcan?
Yeah, there's no such thing as planet Vulcan. And, you know, like, we might not ever find the dark matter particle either.
There may not be resolution, because inherent to the nature of science is the fact that whatever we know is provisional. And, it is apt to change. So I think this is what, motivates people like me to continue doing science, is the fact that it keeps opening up more and more questions. Nothing is ultimately resolved.
So what does that mean? I mean, is the idea that we can just never know anything about dark matter for sure?
No, I think the lesson is more like knowledge is really hard won. But part of the process of that is trusting our observations. People are looking for dark matter because our observations tell us it's there to find. And there's a lot of evidence that it is there to find.
Like more than stars moving fast on the edge of galaxies?
Yeah, so we definitely see the stars moving fast at the edge of the galaxies. That's a huge piece of evidence. But we also see evidence of dark matter in these kind of bubbles in space. Like matter can distort the space around it, and we see light actually bending around dark matter. We can also create these maps of where dark matter is in the universe by looking at where it bends light.
There are these flows of dark matter, and then there are regions where dark matter filaments intersect. That's where gas falls in, cools, forms stars, and you form galaxies.
Dark matter is the scaffolding of our universe. It doesn't just hold galaxies together and keep stars from flinging apart. It's why galaxies are where they are in the first place. When we look into the night sky and we see galaxies, dark matter is the reason why we see what we see.
It would be correct to say that dark matter actually shapes the entire visible universe.
Okay, let me see if I can put this all together.
Go for it.
Vera Rubin kicked all this off by saying, stars are moving way too fast and we need an explanation.
Yes.
And the basic idea now is that it's dark matter because that could provide all the extra gravity we need.
Yeah, dark matter is that source of mass.
But it's still technically possible that we could just, rewrite gravity to explain this all away, kind of pull an Einstein?
I mean, you try pulling an Einstein. Yeah, technically it's possible, but there's a lot more evidence on the side of dark matter.
Right.
We can see the way it bends light. It helps us explain how galaxies formed. And, at the end of the day, yes, we are still missing the key piece of evidence that dark matter is real. We haven't found the particle.
Right.
But that doesn't take away from everything else we know about it.
It's like you're on a beach, you have a lot of sand dunes that kind of form, and so we are in a situation where we are able to understand how these sand dunes form, but we don't actually know what a grain of sand is made of.
Noam, I know you were saying that the dark matter kind of felt made up. Do you still feel that way?
I guess hearing this, I can get behind the idea that we don't actually have to know every tiny detail of a thing in order to understand, how it works and how it affects the universe in all these ways. And I can see why all these scientists are spending so much time looking for something that has the potential to be so important.
Yeah, dark matter is a lot to accept, and you don't have to be perfectly confident in it because, we don't have the perfect evidence.
So, how much do we have to accept? I know there's a lot of dark matter out there, but do we know exactly how much there is?
It's believed there's 5 times the amount of dark matter compared to normal matter in the universe. It's funny even calling it normal matter when most of the matter in the universe, the vast majority of the matter in the universe, is dark matter. And, this whole time we've been talking about dark matter like it's one thing, but it doesn't have to be. There could be this whole kind of ghost universe.
I mean, particle physicists are really playing with this really interesting idea of an entire dark sector, like an entire set of particles that are mirrored with the particles that we know about.
It's like there's this kind of shadow universe that we don't have access to that is made up of different components that kind of exists as a ghost enveloping our galaxies. We don't know what more, if we keep pulling on this thread of dark matter, what more we'll find behind that veil, in that abyss.
It really just feels like that scene in Men in Black with all the marbles, or imagine looking up at the stars and feeling so tiny, but times a million, even all those stars out there are insignificant compared to dark matter.
everything we know, everything we see, everything we've cataloged as being the universe is really only a tiny sliver of the universe. And that's just humbling.
Oh, totally. I mean, I think it gives you intellectual and kind of epistemic humility, right? That we are simultaneously like super insignificant, tiny, tiny speck of the universe. But on the other hand, right, we have like brains in our skulls that are like these tiny gelatinous cantaloupes, and we have figured all of this out. In the grand scheme of the cosmos, we're just like tiny witnesses who are here for a speck. Our lifespans are tiny, not even a wink of the eye, as it were. It's something that should make us all feel really humble as well as be in total awe.
The only thing I can think about is the feeling that makes me feel is, have you ever hiked the Grand Canyon, like to the bottom?
Not all the way to the bottom, no.
So you get to the Grand Canyon, it looks enormous. You're at the rim. It looks like this like oil painting, like it's so huge. But then as you start to descend into it and get towards the bottom, it only starts to look bigger. Like you realize that like little details that you saw at the top are actually huge, like craggy rock faces that descend hundreds and hundreds of feet. And you just feel so small. And I love these moments of like realizing the questions are so profound and so big. There's a sense of optimism in a question, right? Like it makes you feel like we can know the answer to them. We can fill in a little bit more of the whole of our ignorance.
I feel like this is exactly Vera Rubin's story. Like she got us here to the edge of this canyon. And honestly, this is the kind of thing that science doesn't always celebrate. I mean, Vera Rubin was sort of overlooked in her lifetime. She never won a Nobel Prize, but really she's the one who got us started on this path.
Yeah, and we don't know what we're going to find down this path. This whole rich discussion we've been having about dark matter and what it is and what it could be, it's all because of her. And it's all because she pointed to this big blank spot of what we don't know.
Thanks for listening to Unexplainable. We're thinking about making more of these, about how we still don't really know how the nose works, what aliens might sound like, or why lightning sometimes shows up as a ball? What? Let us know if there's an unexplainable science mystery you might want us to look into, and let us know what you thought of this episode. You can tweet at me. I'm at Rameswaram. You can tweet at Today Explained. It's at today_explained. Email works too. todayexplained@vox.com. Please don't email me. Today's episode of Unexplainable was reported and produced by Brian Resnick, Bird Pinkerton, and Noam Hassenfeld, who wrote the music for it too. The episode was edited by Amy Drozdowska and Liz Kelly Nelson, with some clutch pointers from Eliza Barkley and Allison Rocky. Afim Shapiro did the mixing and sound design. Thanks to Katie Mack, Catherine Zurich, Alan Lightman, and David Dvorkin. The archival tape in this episode came from David and the American Institute of Physics. If you want to learn more about Vera Rubin, Ashley Yeager is working on a biography of her, which comes out next fall. It's called All the Matter We Cannot See. Today Explained is part of the Vox Media Podcast Network. We're taking a few days off. Back.
God, that was the longest outro. Yeah. I keep talking because I keep talking because I keep talking. So I'm going to keep talking because I keep talking. Guys, we did it. Did the news, yoga, Today Explained, as you clearly heard. All we need now is an affirmation. Now sit right here. To apply for more jobs today, or not to apply for more jobs. Noodle, don't noodle. You're too worried about what once was and not what will be. However, there's a saying. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow's a mystery. But today is a gift. That is why they call it present. Guys, thank you so much for joining. I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next time on another great episode of All While High. I'll talk to you soon.